here we go.
Welcome to the Nine Route Fantasy Football Podcast.
Welcome back into the Nine Route Fantasy Football Podcast here with your Week 13 starts and sits. We record all this stuff together in one sitting, and depending on how much material we have to go through, we tend to see lately that it's become enough material for two separate podcasts. So if that continues to be the case, we're going to continue to bring you our waiver wire episode on Tuesday morning and then release our start sits sometime either Wednesday night or Thursday morning before the Thursday night football game goes. So we have another week here where, we got into some pretty good discussions and just a lot of stuff that, we didn't want to edit out. So we decided to split it up and make two podcasts. So we're going to go ahead and move forward with our start sits for week 13.
This just in, Christian McCaffrey placed on injured reserve, out for the rest of the season.
Wow. Are you serious? Wow.
Yes. Yeah. So that just happened.
Boy, your whole, you want to just stop doing this whole podcast thing? We can end it right now if you want.
No. You know what? I'm kind of over it. I mean, last year was a bit, obviously we're going to go off on a tangent before our start sits, but last year was interesting. Our league, we have almost like a mercy rule for keepers that if your keeper or a player on your roster that you want to keep doesn't play any more than 25% of the game. So at the time it was basically 4 games or less, you could keep that player. Keepability expires after 2 years of keeping them. So you could draft them, keep them again. So you could have them for up to 3 years. I had McCaffrey last year and I had thought, hey, why not? It worked out just fine where I could keep him. He's going to come back. He's going to be healthy. And that didn't quite work out. It was a hamstring within the first couple of weeks of the season, missed a few games, made his way back, and then looked to be totally back to normal for a minute there. And then now this has just happened again for the second time. For the second time in 2 seasons. He goes on, last year really wasn't season-ending IR. They kind of just drug it week to week, which, again, that kind of jams you up a little bit too on your fantasy roster with the space to be able to put somebody on, on an injured / reserve concept. So, him being out there, it is what it is. So, for all you Christian McCaffrey owners, again, we talked about Chuba Hubbard, and again, Amir Abdullah looks to be a little maybe relevant. You're going to probably want to look for just a better option overall. Right now, Carolina went from looking like they were good to maybe not as good. They're going into a bye week, so they're going to have some time to lick their wounds and figure out how to figure out their own running back position. Again, they have Cam there, so he'll probably be involved as well. To me now, it just jumps out to be committee city. And unfortunately, it's a shame for that to happen to him again. I know it was a high ankle sprain boot situation coming out of that. So chances are this isn't good. And that was similar injury to what he had last year that took all year to get better. So it looks like maybe that ship, unfortunately, has sailed.
Yeah, I think the Carolina offense, we saw the Carolina offense struggle with McCaffrey out. I think that, unfortunately for McCaffrey owners, this is the worst news you could get. I mean, it is better than, like you said, it's better than it being drug out week after week. Maybe he'll come back. Maybe he won't. Maybe he will. At least now you can, if you're in a keeper league or something like that, you can just put him in your IR spot and let it be. But I think the Carolina offense is going to struggle as a whole because of this as well. Like DJ Moore struggled when McCaffrey was out. Robbie Anderson, I mean, he's kind of been struggling all year, but you saw him finally have a good game when McCaffrey came back. So I don't know, man, with Cam's wild inaccuracy, I'm not really, I'm thinking, unfortunately, the trade deadline is passed and I can't, sell my Carolina Panthers offensive pieces at this point in time, but I'm not looking forward to having to start any of those other pieces in fantasy for the rest of the season.
No, yeah, I think it's going to be one of those where unless it's a matchup or something or other, it's going to look pretty dire right now. I mean, offensively, they had been struggling again. Yeah, passing the football, scoring points. Their defense is really what had kind of held them, and they were starting to leak again. They just had that nice game against Arizona where they really looked to be clicking. Cam Superman was back, the whole 9 yards. Again, they go into a bye. We'll see what happens, but I would probably, like you said, probably kind of bench them and slash cut bait or see if you can get somebody to bite on a name, maybe, in some package or lump them together just to kind of make a deal happen for those that still have trade deadlines available. But Carolina Panthers, Christian McCaffrey, we hardly knew you.
All right, so let's move into the start sits here. We'll get them knocked out, and then you can go cry into your lunch, I guess. I don't know.
No, man. You know what? I'm good. I'm gonna figure it out. I'll move on. I'm gonna make the playoffs.
I like that resolve. Let's figure out who you're gonna start and sit to make that happen.
All right. Well, starting at the quarterback position this week, and please don't laugh. I kind of like Ben Roethlisberger against Baltimore. They do give up a little bit of points against the quarterback position. Now, again, you'll say, well, they didn't do it this week. Yeah, because it was playing against Baker Mayfield, and again, he's just not a
quarterback,
not a top end QB. No, sir, not at all. They're a little bit on the bottom end, so to speak, probably in the bottom 10 as far as quarterbacks go. They give around like somewhere in that like 18 to maybe 20 points a game, which is serviceable. Roethlisberger's coming off of one of the worst games of his career, and again, getting smoked by Cincinnati, turnovers, things like that have really happened to kind of push things into that area. That Cincinnati game too, though, it was kind of tough. It was coming off. There was back-to-back road games for them. He had been looking pretty solid, putting up points during the season in the last few weeks. It almost looked like maybe he righted the ship, so to speak, or did what needed to be done. So I do kind of like Ben Roethlisberger in a division game this week against the Baltimore Ravens, who are the 24th best or worst, however you want to call it, against the quarterback position.
I'm going to start Derek Carr this week. We talked about it briefly in the streaming QB section. Again, he gets Washington. They're last in the league versus the QB position. Carr, he's I want to say 14th ranked quarterback as far as fantasy points in our league. I know obviously all scoring settings are different, but he's top 15. He has only had 2 other matchups all year where he's faced a bottom 10 defense to the quarterback position. Now that's current, obviously. At the time, some teams may have been bottom 10, but the larger sample size of it now being, 12 weeks into the season, looking back, only 2 of those matchups have been against bottom 10 teams. And he's averaged over 26 points per game in those 2 games. And I think that from what I saw, we live out on the East Coast, don't get a ton of Raiders games other than what you see on national television, Sunday night, Monday Night Football, stuff like that. But I do watch as much football as I possibly can, obviously. And I feel like this past week against the Cowboys, it's the best that the Raiders offense has looked since the very beginning of the year. And that's when Derek Carr had those 2 big games. And then, he has a good game against the Cowboys on Thanksgiving Day. So I think that the Raiders are starting to figure things out now, sort of post John Gruden and, post Henry Ruggs, I guess. And I think they're starting, you saw Deshaun Jackson get a little bit more involved, and, hopefully Waller isn't out for an extended period of time, because that will definitely hurt. But like we mentioned earlier, Foster Moreau is a serviceable tight end. And I think that against this Washington football team, I think, Derek Carr has the potential to throw 3 touchdowns and, put a pretty good whooping on Washington.
Well, as far as that, I do agree. Now, who I'm sitting this week, and I know some of you out there are going to say, dude, you have no idea what you're talking about. And hey, I say that to myself all the time. But I feel like this is going to be a tough week for those Buffalo Bills. We hinted at it earlier. I would think you're going to find a better option than Josh Allen this week. And I know that, again, he's one of the top players in fantasy, period. He's one of the top quarterbacks in fantasy. But when it comes to checking the quarterback position, the New England Patriots are really one of the tops. You know, they really just know how to shut down a quarterback. Belichick knows what he's doing when it comes to that. Now, again, the quarterback can rise above, and they're not undefeated. They've never not lost a game. But at the end of the day, they're only giving up about 12 points to the position. They've gotten 19 interceptions so far this season. Again, they really are a really tough team. 2 rushing touchdowns to the quarterback position. So anything that's Josh Allen's wheelhouse, and I'm going to touch on another player shortly, but to me, this is the game of the year for the AFC, this one and the next New England one. I believe both of those, whoever comes out of this on top, I feel like that team is going to be the Super Bowl team. And I kind of lean New England. I really see them being just quietly the strong team, and everybody's kind of still writing them off, but they're leading the AFC East. Buffalo is as strong as they are. I think they see that. It's almost like when people used to see the Yankees pinstripes and lose the game just on that. I think they're going to maybe kind of smell themselves and see what's going on and say, oh my God, we're playing New England for the division right now. And I just don't see it as a good matchup for Josh Allen. I think you can find, not saying you cut him, not saying you drop him, but I think you can find a better matchup this week, possibly even streaming that we just mentioned.
Yeah, it's bold when you take one of those top guys and throw him into your start sit, because it's not like people are going to sit him more than likely, unless you happen to, have him and maybe you drafted somebody like Tom Brady later or whatever. But yeah, it's tough when
bench him for Mac Jones. He gets Buffalo's number 1 against a quarterback.
Yeah, so I was gonna say Buffalo's
that.
number 1 and then New England's number 2. But there are some options out there. I do agree that maybe not waiver wire options. I think Carr's the best for me. The Carr's the best waiver wire option. I would still start Josh Allen over Derek Carr if I had both guys on my roster. But I do agree that I probably would be biting my nails leading up to that Monday Night Football game, hoping that I don't need a huge number from Allen to come back and win my week. I would say that. So I'm going to sit Joe Burrow this week versus the Los Angeles Chargers. I pick the quarterback against the Chargers quite often in my start sits because I feel like, the book is out on the Chargers. And if I know it, I'm 100% sure that other NFL coaching rooms know it. The way to beat the Chargers is on the ground. They are the 6th best team versus the quarterback position. They are the 4th best team versus the wide receiver position, but they are 26th versus the running back position. They still give up the most yards, and they give up the 3rd most yards per carry and the 3rd most rushing touchdowns in the league so far this year. The Cincinnati Bengals have an outstanding running back in Joe Mixon. They mix in enough, Samaje Perine to keep Mixon not being overused, although averaging 18 and a half carries a game, which I believe is what Mixon averages. I think he have 28 last week.
Yeah.
And then Evans and Perine get in there for a few carries. So I think this could be a real big week for Joe Mixon. Not such a great week for Joe Burrow and the wide receiver options for the Bengals. So I'm going to sit Joe Burrow this week against the Chargers.
Moving on to running backs. I like, as much as I do like the Giants defense as one of my streamers this week against Miami, I do like Myles Gaskin this week against the Giants. They are kind of a poor team when it comes to the running back position. They're probably about 7th when it comes to 7th worst, best, however you want to look at it, for giving up points in fantasy to the running back position. We're looking at about right now, we're looking at about 20 points a game, roughly, that they are giving up to the position. Now, Myles Gaskin has played pretty well over the last couple of weeks. He has one little clunker in there against Baltimore, but put up point games of 17, 15, 18, and 19. scoring touchdowns, using that dual role that people thought he was going to be destined for. He's quietly been a pretty steady running back throughout the season. So I do like Myles Gaskin to be probably a top 15 running back this week against the New York Football Giants.
And I am going to go back to the well one more time with Miles Sanders for the Philadelphia Eagles. He could have had a really good game this past week. He had a decent game. He only rushed the ball 9 times for 64 yards against the Giants. I don't really know why they kind of got away from him. He seemed to look pretty good in that game, but Boston Scott ended up with, the majority of the carries and the only rushing touchdown of the game. So I'm going to hope and pray that the Eagles coaching staff, realizes the talent that Sanders has and starts giving him the ball a little bit more. I saw a tweet shortly after the game was over, and it literally sums up, I guess, how I feel about the Eagles and Miles Sanders. And it basically just said, why do the Eagles hate Miles Sanders? I'm not really sure, but I think that there's enough to go around against this 32nd ranked Jets defense versus the running back position for Miles Sanders and Boston Scott to both have a good game. But I'm going to stick with Miles Sanders because to me, he's still the guy. He's still the number one guy in Philadelphia, and he still is the most explosive back that the Eagles have. And I think that, given enough carries, he's going to explode and have a good game at some point. And no team better to do it against than the Jets.
So who are you going to sit this week?
Well, my sit this week it was a little bit tough for me because I really like this player, and I actually tried trading for him in a few of the leagues that I was in, but I don't like the matchup this week for David Montgomery. He gets to go against the Arizona Cardinals, who are the 10th best team versus the running back position, and I kind of look at these games and sort of play out in my mind how they're going to go. And the Bears defense they're not terrible, but they're not great. I think with Kyler Murray back, with DeAndre Hopkins back, I think that the Cardinals are going to be able to score, which is going to sort of force Chicago to, need to throw the ball a little bit more. Now, Montgomery does catch some passes out of the backfield, so there is always the possibility that, he doesn't have a great game on the ground, but goes, 7 for 55 through the air, which, would totally destroy my sit for him. But, looking at him strictly as a runner versus this Arizona defense, I don't really like the matchup for him this week. So I'm going to go with David Montgomery as my sit this week. What about you?
This one, maybe not high on the radar, but for some people that have been using him as maybe a low end flex. David Johnson, real quick, just for the Houston Texans. We talked about Burkhead kind of being the lead guy, so that may cut into it a little bit. But, for those that are still hanging on to the David Johnson of 2016 and like to use him as a flex, and he gets somewhere between 8 and 12 points a week playing that dual role out of the backfield. They're going against the Indianapolis Colts, who are one of the top 10 defenses against the running back position. Yeah, they just got lit up by Leonard Fournette for 4 touchdowns, but before that, they'd only given up 3 total to the running back position as far as out of the backfield. And I believe it was a total of 6 altogether. Again, they just got rolled by this running back who kind of really just took the game over. I don't think that's going to happen 2 weeks in a row, and I don't think it's going to happen against the Houston Texans. So again, for anybody that was hoping for any life out there from, again, a David Johnson, just to be a passive flex or anything, he definitely does not need to be involved in your offense this week.
Yeah, no, I would start any of the guys that we talked about in our waiver wire segment over him, obviously. He was in the waiver wire segment, but at the bottom. So any of those guys that are available, I like them more than Johnson. So it's a good call. So who are you going to start at your wide receiver position?
Well, I like, again, he's quietly, I want to say he's kind of like a poor man's Cooper Kupp right now. And again, some of this is just the way the Raiders offense is kind of flexed around and morphed into what it is through the season. He only has 2 games with less than 10 points, so 2 games less than double digits, and the volume does go his way. Hunter Renfrow against the Washington football team They're giving up about 26 points a game to the wide receiver position. Hunter Renfrow himself has really just been great, honestly, all season. This week, he so far, barring a Monday night game, he's top 3 wide receivers, wide receiver 3. He had 8 catches for 134 yards. Doesn't get the touchdowns as much, but in a way that's kind of good because he's only got 4 in the season. His is in a PPR league. He is a monster. Again, in a non PPR, he's probably a little more average or passive. But if you're in a PPR league, I think Hunter Renfrow is going to have a very good day against the Washington football team. They're a bottom 10 team against the wide receiver position. They'll be coming off a short week against Seattle. Raiders have plenty of time to come off the high of beating Dallas on Thanksgiving and set up to beat the Washington football team. So I like Hunter Renfrow. I think he's going to be probably another top 5 wide receiver this week.
Makes me feel better about my call on Derek Carr too.
You're welcome.
My start of the week is going to be CeeDee Lamb. I know he's a guy that you're probably starting anyway, but I have a lot of confidence in Lamb this week for a couple of different reasons. Amari Cooper, obviously, he missed the last 2 games due to contracting COVID, and because he was unvaccinated, wasn't able to get back in time for the Thanksgiving game. But I think that just in time for Cooper to get that shadow from Marshawn Lattimore of the New Orleans Saints, I think that that's exactly what CeeDee Lamb needs to sort of become the focal point of that offense. I think that the New Orleans Saints are the 6th worst team to the wide receiver position in fantasy football, but the wide receiver 1 doesn't score the majority of the points of that 37 or 38 points or so that they give up per week in PPR leagues. They tend to give up a lot of points to the number 2 wide receiver. They actually give up the most points to the number 2 wide receiver of any team in the league. And unless the Saints switch it up and they sort of see CeeDee Lamb as, the number 1, then, it's possible that Cooper could be the guy that gets the majority of the looks, but Marshawn Lattimore generally lines up against the bigger, stronger, alpha type wide receiver, which is Amari Cooper in this offense. So I do see CeeDee Lamb getting probably double-digit targets, and I'm going to say well over 100 yards and a touchdown this week versus the Saints.
Heard that. As far as who I'm looking to sit this week, again, I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to ride the horse or the buffalo, so to speak. Again, I'm not saying he's cut him. I'm not saying bench him, but I do feel like the wide receiver 1 won't be worthy, possibly a 2. I kind of feel like he might be down on a flex level. I think the New England Patriots are going to look to neutralize 1 wide receiver in specific, and that's going to be Stephon Diggs. I think he's going to be really getting a lot of man coverage, a lot of matchups against that secondary. I think overall they're going to make life hard for Josh Allen, which will in turn make it hard for Diggs. I see somebody, like a Dawson Knox, a Cole Beasley, some of the running back positions that we talked about being a little more utilized. I think they're going to have to claw and fight and scrap to try to win this game and keep their offense moving. As dynamic as they've been, Diggs has 1 blip on the radar against the Kansas City Chiefs this season where he was under double-digit points, and they actually do have a good number, as far as fantasy-wise against the wide receiver position as a whole. New England only gives up a total to the entire position of 18 points a game. So even if Diggs gets all of that, that would be good. But, they're going to have to spread the ball around when it comes down to it. So I kind of feel like you might want to fade Diggs a little bit too. Wide receiver 2, probably, possibly. But I feel like he might be even limited to like a 10 to 12 point, possibly single digits. I think they're going to key on him this week.
Yeah. And again, he gets their number 1 corner, JC Jackson, who is slowly becoming the best cover corner in the league. So
yep,
he's it's going to be tough sledding for the Bills this week. I agree. I am going to sit Elijah Moore this week versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Eagles are the 2nd best team versus the wide receiver position in fantasy football. And as great as Elijah Moore looked in the weeks leading up to this past game, Zach Wilson is back, and he is sinking the offense with him. I shouldn't say that. I talked in length about Wilson earlier, and I do think that he's going to be a good quarterback in this league someday. I just think that for the time being, I'm not really willing to put Elijah Moore in my lineup until I see a little bit better connection between the two. And I definitely don't want to do that against a defense that's been as stingy to the wide receivers as the Eagles have been this year. So I am going to hold off on Elijah Moore for one more week and hope that I see a little bit better connection between him and Zach Wilson before I put him back into my lineups. Moving on to the tight end position, who are you going to start for tight end this week?
To me, it's a no-brainer. I think he's probably going to be tight end one, maybe two. And I think he's not only back, but I think he's back full bore as at least for this season as a top 5 guy. Rob Gronkowski, and I mean it's maybe a bit of a layup, but the performance he just put up against Indy, and we talked about how they were able to exploit the matchup on that level. It's Tom Brady's number one target. He's back. He's healthy. He was his number one target in New England, and you've seen that already this season. Whenever he's been on the field, Rob Gronkowski has been a major factor. He just busted out a very, very, very good game. So 7 of 10 for 123 yards, no touchdowns, and he still put up 21 points and is the tight end one in our league currently, barring anything crazy going off on Monday night. So I do love Rob Gronkowski. I think to finish the season out, he's probably going to be a top 3 or 4 tight end, barring injury or anything crazy happening.
Yes, I agree. NFL has missed Gronk. I'm going to start. Well, I'm reaching for this one here a little bit because we haven't actually seen him play a game in, 2 months, but he should be back tonight. Logan Thomas should be back against the Seattle Seahawks tonight. We'll see how he looks. Hopefully he remains unscathed through this Monday night game, because I have him as my start for tight end next week versus the Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders are the second worst team behind only the Philadelphia Eagles to the tight end position. Like I said, Thomas did miss those last, I think he's missed the team's last 7 games with a hamstring injury, but he gets to go against Seattle tonight and Las Vegas next week, which both of those teams are bottom 10 teams to the tight end position. So he gets a nice welcome back, Logan Thomas. I think that, we obviously saw that Ricky Seals-Jones, when he was in there before he got hurt, was filling in admirably for Thomas. I don't believe that Ricky Seals-Jones is as talented as Logan Thomas is, and he still was able to give you quite a few games of decent fantasy numbers. I think now that Thomas is back, I think he's going to be targeted a good probably 6 to 8 times per game these next 2 games, and possibly similarly moving forward. And I think that he's a guy who, if for whatever reason he was dropped in your leagues because of the length of the injury, he's a guy that you need to go out and grab and start. I mean, you can start him this week. I would definitely start him next week against the Raiders, but if you can get him on your roster, if he's still out there and available in your league somehow, go out and grab him, because he could potentially be a league winner for you if you are struggling at the tight end position.
This week, who are you looking to sit?
So I'm going to stick with the Bills and Patriots game here for my tight end sit. Strangely, I'm going to the other side of it, though. I'm going to sit Hunter Henry this week versus the Bills. The Bills are 4th best versus the tight end position. And as I rode that Hunter Henry train when George Kittle was injured in one of my leagues, and I loved every touchdown that he scored. But it seems like now that Mac Jones is getting a little bit more comfortable with the offense, he's getting more comfortable with his wide receivers. Kendrick Bourne, we talked about earlier, is becoming a little bit more integrated into the offense. Obviously, Jacoby Myers is still doing his thing. Aguilar gets his few passes. Jonnu Smith is now back, from his injury. So there's a lot more options out there. And while Hunter Henry is still being targeted in the red zone, he's got 3 red zone targets the last 2 games. That's pretty much all he's getting is red zone targets. So if he doesn't score, he basically, leaves you with a single digit point total in your tight end position. And that's just not something that I'm really looking, I don't want to have to sit there and hope that a guy scores a touchdown, especially against a really tough Buffalo Bills defense. So I am not playing Hunter Henry in any of my leagues this week.
I'm going to sit TJ Hawkinson this week against the Minnesota Vikings. He's obviously, one of the better tight ends in the league. We do understand that. He's been a little mortal this season with a couple of games, but again, that's going to happen with Detroit's offense and him being the focal point. Going against Minnesota this season, they have been 6th best against the tight end position. They have given up only one receiving touchdown all season long. And it's been less than 5 points a game for them. Even if he does get a little bit involved in this, I don't see much of an offensive output. He strikes me as single digits, seeing how stingy that defense is against the tight end position, only 37 receptions also. So again, in a PPR sense, it sounds like the tight ends against the Minnesota Vikings do a lot of blocking and not a lot of play on a fantasy football level. So again, I think TJ Hawkinson is going to be a sit this week. You probably find a better option.
Yeah, and the Vikings are one of those teams that I like where they're really bad against the quarterback and the wide receiver positions, but for some reason really good against the tight end. So they're kind of easy to, for another team to look at and say, okay, this is where we want to attack. And it looks like the outside, the wide receiver position is the place to attack the Minnesota Vikings. So I do like that call as much as I hate it because I have TJ Hawkinson on the record, but All right. So what about defenses? Who you going to start for your defense this week?
I'm gonna put my money where my mouth is. Cincinnati Bengals versus the Los Angeles Chargers. Chargers again. You had the game against Pittsburgh where they did kind of go off, but Justin Herbert has struggled a little bit lately overall, and I think that is going to come into play against the defense in the Cincinnati Bengals. I still have Carolina on my mind because of McCaffrey. The Cincinnati Bengals, they put up 29 points in the last 2 weeks for a defense. That's pretty good. Again, they just lit Pittsburgh up. I just see them maybe following suit and trying to hold the Chargers back as much as possible, really. And looking at, Cincinnati overall defensively against the different positions, they don't really get beat up too bad. They're kind of one of the top defenses. Kind of one of the top defenses all around. And when it comes to the quarterback position in particular, they're about 7th best. They only give up about 16 points a game to that position. So overall, I could see Cincinnati really making some hay. Again, they shut down the wide receiver position as well. So Eckler might get involved, but I'd like Cincinnati's defense as a whole.
I'm going to go with the Eagles versus the Jets. There's not really much to say. Zach Wilson is back, and the Eagles defense has been pretty good. So I could see a few turnovers in their future here, and pretty cut and dry start against the worst team versus the defense special teams in fantasy football. So that was a kind of an easy one. Who are you sitting this week?
For some people, they might still be high on them, but I would say you're going to have to sit the New Orleans Saints. They had a couple games this year with some big numbers, with turnovers and sacks and things like that. But ever since they had a 15-point game against Tampa Bay, they have put up 2, 4, and 5 in our league. Going up against Dallas on Thursday night, that's a week from the game against Buffalo, and they got lit up pretty hard. Dallas, again, they're leaking a little bit of oil, but at the end of the day, that offense strikes me as being something that's going to go in there and really kind of take it to them. The Saints as a whole, as a team, has really struggled overall, which, to be understood. So the offense and defense are kind of beating each other up at the same time. So I would say the New Orleans Saints are going to be a sit this week. You can definitely find a better option. Don't start them against Dallas.
All right. And I'm going to sit The Denver Broncos, I know that we had them in our stream section earlier and you liked them this week, but I remember Andy Reid off of a bye week and how, I mean, I don't want to guess at his record off the top of my head, but I want to say it's somewhere around like 22-2 or something like that coming off of a bye week. Andy Reid just seems to take that bye week to, I don't know if he just does 2 straight weeks of prep for one game or, what his deal is, but he just seems to come out of the bye week every single year and his team is on fire. And the Denver Broncos have a really good defense. And I'm not saying that, I think that the Kansas City Chiefs are, going to put a 50 spot up against Denver, but I do think that they're going to play better. I do think that they're going to turn the ball over less than they have been, because I think that that's going to be a point of emphasis for the Chiefs during this bye week. And again, the Chiefs can score regardless of how good Denver's defense is. And I think that without the turnovers there to sort of help Denver rack up fantasy points, I think it's going to be a tough day for them versus the Kansas City Chiefs. And I guess that's going to do it for our start sits. Hopefully, if you guys are making these same decisions as far as whether to start or sit these specific players, hopefully some of our analysis helped. If you have any other start sit questions, please feel free to hit us up on social media, our email, which will be at the end of the show. If you're listening to this podcast, generally, you probably know Rudy or myself or both of us. You got my number. I'm always available. Just shoot me a text and, I'll be happy to answer any start sit questions for you. I'm running a little long, so just going to say, hope everyone had a happy Thanksgiving, and we will catch up with you all next week. Good luck on your matchups and your playoff push towards your fantasy playoffs. Peace.
We'd like to sincerely thank you for listening to the show. You can follow us on Twitter at the 9Route1 and at Scott from Delco. We put out a lot of funny and informative information on there. Our email address, if you'd like to email the show, is the 9routeFFB@gmail.com. Make sure to click the little plus wherever you're listening to follow the show. And if you like what we do, please leave us a review. Good luck this week, and we'll be back next week with more fantasy football info to take your team deep here on the 9 Route Fantasy Football Podcast.